Hello, this is John Majori with Majori on Bowie, and this is the Majori on Bowie YouTube channel, where I have a new interview every week that always has something to do with David Bowie. And for daily content, visit the blog, www.majorionbowie.com, where I have new content every single day that almost always has something to do with David Bowie. And today, I'm very, very excited to have a very special guest joining me today, Karin Ann. Karin Ann is one of the most compelling rising voices in music today. Born in Slovakia, she's been gaining international attention for songs that are both musically adventurous and emotionally direct, with lyrics that explore identity, mental health, and the complexities of modern life. She's been recognized not just for her artistry, but also for her activism and her willingness to speak out, making her both a cultural and creative force to watch. Karin is already a major star in Central Europe. Her debut album, released last year, Through the Telescope, has received international praise, and her videos have a cinematic quality. Of course, this is a Bowie show, and so if you don't know already, you might be wondering, does Karin Ann have a Bowie connection? And the answer to that question is, does she ever? Karin recently released a really beautiful rendition of Bowie's Heroes that was produced by none other than Mark Plati and features 8 Bowie alumni musicians, creating a powerful intergenerational connection to Bowie's legacy. So Karin Ann, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Karin, I feel like I'm catching you at the point that Bowie was at between the release of Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust, where he'd already been releasing some great classic music, but you haven't quite had your Ziggy Stardust moment yet. And I just want to get a sense from you, how would you describe where you are in your own career trajectory at this particular moment in time?
Honestly, I'm just kind of trying to take things one day at a time. I feel like in the past, I've been very caught up in the big picture, and I kind of forgot to focus on the small moments and fully embrace all the achievements that I've already, experienced and done. So I'm kind of trying to focus on those a little bit more these days. I'm always changing. I'm
Yeah.
always, evolving, and I feel like it's a very exciting journey to be on as an artist, to always evolve and always discover new things about yourself. And I feel like I'm in that moment sort of right now because I am changing my to me it's very natural progression of like where my music is going, but it is different to what I've done so far. I'm also trying to focus a little bit more on acting and just kind of embrace multiple different creative endeavors.
Yeah. Well, I've been watching your videos, and you said you're embracing acting, and I see that in the videos. They're like mini movies. Um,
Yeah, I kind of tried to I really love storytelling.
yes.
So I try in my music videos to have stories
Yeah.
and to kind of tell the core um story of what each song is about.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you caught that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Unmissable. So you just said that you're in a period of transition in your career, and I've read some of the coverage, some of the reviews of Heroes, the song you put out, as marking a shift in your output. And what do you mean by that, especially to either a new fan or somebody that's just beginning to follow you? Where do you see you're going from and to?
I think that something that I've really discovered throughout my album process and also working on Heroes is because I kind of started working on them at the same time, even though Heroes only got released now. I've been working on it for a while now. Um, I've realized that I really like building in my music
Yeah.
and kind of starting a bit smaller and a bit more like stripped back and then, maybe like building it up. So that's something that I've really been implementing in my music. Also, just the way I write and the storytelling I use, I feel like has really evolved. And in part, it was because I got to work on Heroes and, the album I put out already. So all of these things kind of made me see certain parts of myself that maybe I haven't previously and made me embrace them a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I've been moving into a much more storytelling direction with my music, and I'm really excited for people to finally get to hear some of the stuff that I'm working on.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I really, I just really, really enjoy your cover of Heroes. And that got me to starting to listen to all your other music and watching the videos. And I'm reminded of another Bowie song because I think a thread that connects your messaging to your fans, to your audience, is "You're not alone," which is a line from another Bowie song, "Rock and Roll Suicide." And do you feel like your audience is in need of that type of reassurance at this point in time?
I feel like everyone is. I
Yeah,
feel like in these times, we are so focused on what makes us different rather than to what makes us the same. And at the end of the day, we're all human. And I feel like the more we focus on what makes us different, the more we isolate ourselves and the more alone we feel. And I feel like instead we should focus on our similarities and on what makes us human and kind of embrace each other, including our differences, because everyone is different, but also there's so much that is just so human and
yeah,
it's the same about everyone. And if we would, maybe give each other some grace and kindness instead of being so jaded all the time, it would make us a lot more focused on community, and it would make us a lot more maybe accepted and happier.
yeah,
Um, so I definitely feel like we are in times where people very much need it. I know I do.
yeah, yeah. No, it's timely. So going back to Heroes, so how did the project come together?
Honestly, um, my team talked to me about the fact that they know Mark, and they were like, "We know that you like Bowie. Like, would you ever want to maybe do a cover of one of his songs?" And I said, "No." I said, "I don't." And they were like, "Why not?" And I said, "I have so much respect for him as an artist, and so many people do, and so many people love him, and I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to do a cover. I don't feel like I can do it justice." Um, so my team said, "Okay, how about we just like start working on it with Mark, and if you feel like you don't want to continue with it, if you feel like uncomfortable in it, or you really are so stuck on the fact that you don't think you might, do it justice, then we can just, drop it. We don't have to release it, whatever." And as we started working on it, Heroes for me was kind of my natural choice because it's one of my all-time favorite songs. I think it's my favorite Bowie song.
Yeah.
Um, so
Now
that was my
that was going to be my
natural.
last question for you. So
Sorry. My bad. Um, but yeah, so I really wanted to work on this song, but I wasn't really feeling confident in it. But the more I worked on it and the more I talked to Mark, the more he was saying that he thinks that Bowie would like it.
yeah,
And that really gave me, the confidence to kind of keep moving forward. And then later, we got a lot of people that worked in it with him brought onto the project. We got Gail, we got Everett, we got Catherine, we got Henry, we got all these people. And that just really made me a lot more comfortable and a lot more like maybe I could do it justice, and maybe it wasn't, because it's kind of hard doing covers because you want to make it your own. But if you like something so much, and especially if it's by somebody that's so well respected and had so much, praise for his work, you love their work as well. You're like, I don't want to change it because I love it, but how do you make it your own? And I feel like we managed to do it really well.
Yeah.
And I feel like we paid tribute to the original, but still made it original in a way. So I'm really proud of it and I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm going to get back to you making it your own because you really do. And but before we do that, you mentioned some of the musicians that played on it, and for people who watch this show, they're superstars, right? They are I've had many of them on this show, and when I have an episode with one of these musicians, those are my most popular. So, what does it mean to you to perform with these particular musicians?
It's a great honor. It's like I mentioned, I was very wary about going into this project, and the fact that I had their trust and I had their support in it really meant a lot. Um, and yeah, it just made me feel like I have a tendency to have a big imposter syndrome, a little bit of like, like there's so many others that could do things I do and they could do it then better and, things like that. I feel like every artist kind of has that. So this really just made me feel safe and
Yeah,
comfortable in the project and confident in it. And yeah, it was a huge honor. It was amazing. And it was amazing to see them in action, like I mentioned. And I'm just really, really happy with what we made.
yeah. Well, the sense I get is that these guys wouldn't just do this for anybody, and I felt like, in a way, they're sort of passing the torch, or they're designating you as a torchbearer. So, you know, I understand.
It's an interesting, definitely an interesting take. And there has been a couple of people in my life that compared me to Bowie in just like the way I look at art, which again, like I feel like when you grow up around people like Bowie and like Freddie Mercury as well, it's just like their ways kind of imprint on you in a way.
Yeah,
So I'm honored that people, might see some similarities because I have such a big respect for Bowie and for everything he's done. And he's pushed music forward so much, and he also pushed some other, helped push some other things forward as well. And yeah, it's just, I feel like I keep repeating myself, but it's just a huge honor. And I definitely feel very grateful.
yeah. So the video shows the different musicians doing their different parts, and Mark Plati had contributed in different ways. One of which was as the producer. So, for somebody who's never made a record before, what does a producer do?
In the simplest terms, I would say that producers kind of oversee the whole project and the whole arrangement of things.
Yeah,
Um, for the longest time, even I was confused about like all the things a producer does because sometimes you're like, oh, I know what they do, and then they do something else, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that also like fell under that umbrella. But now I kind of, on the new project I'm working on, I've started being it's I'm working on this project with people I worked with for about 3 years, so I'm really comfortable with them. So I just started voicing certain things and I was like, okay, how about we do this and this instead and use this instrument here for this part. And one of the producers goes, you're co-producing this project now. And I was like, oh, like, okay. So I don't know, I feel like I'm still discovering, but they definitely oversee the whole project and the whole arrangement and like all the parts that go into it. I
yeah,
have a lot of respect for producers.
yeah, yeah. Well, Mark's one of the best, so that's great. So, you mentioned that Heroes is your favorite Bowie song, and you suggested that it has particular meaning to you. What does the song mean to you?
I grew up in a place that wasn't really open-minded to a lot of things that pertain to my identity, and a lot of things that I am on the same wavelength on. Um, so a lot of the times I would feel very isolated and very alone. And I feel like to me, Heroes is about coming together and kind of just like sticking together in your community, you know, whether it's your friends or your family or your found family, whatever it is, just kind of like having people around you that have your back and that make you feel less alone. And I feel like this song definitely did that for me a lot when I was growing up and when I felt out of place.
Yeah. So that's, I listened to your version of the song and it's very hopeful and sort of inspirational. And I go back to Bowie's original that's on the album, the studio version, and I hear it, not every version that he's done, but the version that's on the original album as desperate and almost painful. Like, and if you watch the video, he seems like he's writhing in pain. And it's fascinating to see one song convey two completely different sets of emotions. And how do you like what about that material gives you that type of flexibility to change the emotional meaning?
I feel like it depends on the context in which you sing it.
Yeah,
I feel like when he made the song and when he was working on it and what he made it about, um, the world was in a much, it was, it kind of like needed to hammer home the message of it and kind of just
yeah,
like really like get people to listen. And I feel like while I was making my cover of it, I the world right now is in a very scary place, and it actually is kind of funny because when I started working on it 2 years ago, I thought it was already relatable, but now it's even more relatable than it
yeah,
was back then. And but I do think that we're still at a time where there is a lot more hope.
yeah,
If people do listen and if people do come together, there is still hope to kind of prevent a lot of things that are to come if people don't do it. Meanwhile, when Bowie was making this song, I feel like the times were already at a point where it was harder to have hope.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to ask you a sort of a strange question, but as when you look at the lyrics of the song, which you have to do if you're interpreting the song, you come across this word nothing over and over again. What do you think he was up to with that?
I can't speak for him.
Yeah,
I'm not in his head. And I find when I write lyrics so personal and so specific, I never even want to tell people what they mean because I want everyone to kind of take from them what they need and what they want. I like leaving things kind of up for interpretation. Um, but so I can't speak for him, but for me, it was kind of more hopeful in a way
yeah,
of like, it doesn't matter what, like, we don't have to have a reason
yeah,
to
yeah,
just embrace each other and come together.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh. I saw a review of the song as you covered it and that described it as a queer anthem. Do you see it that way?
That's interesting, actually. Um, I mean, maybe
Yeah,
there's definitely an open space for that.
yeah,
I feel like because I'm a queer artist and I've never kind of shied away from the fact that I'm a queer artist, um, anything I do is kind of perceived as, you know, um, a message to the queer people, which I feel like in a sense it is because it is a part of my identity. Um, and it definitely can be, but I also think that it's not only that. I feel like it can relate to anyone, no matter their identity.
yeah. It's to that end, you have taken your art in the direction of advocacy. And Bowie didn't always do that. And I thought, there's a point of contrast. I was thinking in 1970, he appeared on the cover of The Man Who Sold the World wearing a dress, and that was controversial at the time, but it wasn't overtly political. You you draped yourself in a pride flag on Polish television, and that very much is political. And do you think that this moment in time, 2025, demands something different of artists than, say, 1970?
I feel like it does in a way, but also it is the same if you think about the context of things, because back in the 70s, um, male presenting person wearing a dress was very political. Even in,
Mm.
2018, when
Yeah,
Harry Styles did it,
yeah,
people were talking about it as a very political thing because fashion to me is always political and always have been, and especially when it comes to gender norms and what is expected of what's gendered and what is expected of people who present feminine or masculine. And there's so much talk even now about LGBT, QA plus community and trans rights and gender. In the 70s, somebody who was male presenting wearing a dress to me speaks volumes about where he where his head was and what message he wanted to tell people. So as the world progresses, there is different ways of being political, but I feel like at the end of the day, it is kind of very similar and same in
yeah,
different context
yeah,
context.
That's a very interesting take. Whatever happened to the protest song? You know,
You know, I feel like people now, at least what I see,
yeah,
because I do know that, social media is kind of very niche in a way, like it
yeah,
pertains to you. But what I see, people demand a political stance from artists. And people now more than ever, maybe it is because I am more in folk communities, um, want political songs. And
yeah,
music has always been political, um, whether more subtext wise or more loud political, but it's always been political. The same fashion has always been political, and expression has always been political. So I do think that people want it and people are doing it. And I feel like with what's happening now, it's gonna be happening even more, and there's gonna be a demand for it that's gonna get bigger and bigger, um, because we are living in very scary times and in times where being quiet is compliance, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. You mentioned something a few minutes ago about our we're sort of more divided as a community. And I was thinking, I was reading about how this is the 40th anniversary of Live Aid. And I mean, I'm going to ask you, do you think that that type of thing is even possible anymore? Or is the way that we experience music or other cultural events fragmented? And does that contribute to that type of fragmentation that you're alluding to?
I do wish it was possible, but I do think that right now, unless something changes, it wouldn't really be possible
Yeah,
because people do experience music differently, but also because of the way that music is becoming very inaccessible to people.
yeah,
I don't, I personally don't like where it's going. I'm gonna say
yeah,
it. um, and even in my lifetime, when I was trying to go to a concert at 15, it would cost maybe like 30, $20 to get a ticket. Right
yeah,
now, tickets cost more than some Broadway shows. And Broadway already is very expensive and inaccessible for a lot of people. But the fact that concerts are more expensive is crazy. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Or like on par. Like it shouldn't be that way, especially when it's concerts like, you know, that are catered to the people. That is
Yeah.
not this, because for example, if you look at classical music historically, that's always been like an expensive sort of outing. But if you look at music that's, folk music or hip hop or whatever, that's always been catered for the people, and it's supposed to be accessible to people. So I do think that even if people wanted that to happen, unless something changes, it's not really possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That I'm not going to go down that road, but it raises so many questions about how we experience uh, music, how we experience art, and and how you even promote music these days. I think you're breaking through, but it seems like it's more difficult to do that. I think in a way, you have a higher hill to climb.
I do think that's true. I
Yeah,
do think that in part it is because I refuse to do a lot of the things that people
yeah,
want
yeah,
for me to promote my art, but I kind of always say like the way art is promoted now, I don't like, I'm not a fan of, and it's not supposed to be that way. Even the demand of releasing a song every month and a half
yeah,
is impossible to keep up with because we're not machines. And I would rather give people quality over quantity.
yeah,
And I feel like a lot of, these people in charge are kind of scared that if a person doesn't release every month, they're going to be forgotten. But I don't know about you, but the favorite artists I have, I don't care how much they release because I keep up with them whether they release or not because I love what they're doing.
yeah,
But if I'm just supposed to keep up with somebody because they release all the time, I actually find that harder because I
yeah.
don't have time to even keep up with all the releases.
Right.
You know what I mean? Um, so I definitely don't like what's expected of musicians nowadays. Um, and I am the kind of person that takes their time and likes to take their time because the more pressure there is on me releasing or making something, the less creative I am, the less inspiration I find.
Mm.
Because again, we're not machines. Even if, when it comes to touring schedules, I don't think that the touring schedules that nowadays are the norm are um how do I say this? Sorry, English is not my first language. um, are unsustainable. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yes.
Are very hard to keep up with physically and mentally. And I've had so many conversations with my team now about how to tour where I enjoy it and where it's doable for me. And it's not the way that people find normal nowadays. Um, Even if you look at tours back in the day, especially in the kind of genre I'm in, um, it was more spaced out. It was more like you would go somewhere for a week, you would play in that city for a week, and then you would have 3 weeks off. Or like you would play somewhere for the weekend, then during the week you would, travel elsewhere, and then the next weekend you would be elsewhere. It was not expected from you to be in a different place every single day and play a show every single day because that's unsustainable and it's crazy. And I think that sometimes people don't realize the physical demands of touring and of singing, not to mention mental health as well. But even if you just look at the physical aspect, to keep your voice healthy and to keep your body healthy, it's a it's a big thing because I mean, at the end of the day, the vocal cords are a muscle. And
Yeah.
do you expect athletes to be at a different city competing every day? No, you don't. So I feel like I have a lot of opinions on it, and I feel like I'm kind of, going on a tangent, so I'm gonna stop. But
Okay.
I do I do think that there's like a interesting interesting way it's going, not in a good way not in
Yeah.
a good direction, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
I hear that similar opinions from other musicians that are active now.
I've seen it. So
Yeah.
many people are canceling tours and shows because they can't physically and mentally keep up with the demand.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't envy you. Um, I did want to ask about one other thing that you did that I found really creative and something that others have tried and haven't been as successful with. So you did a song that's stuck in my head, by the way. I blame you. I don't believe in God, right? The refrain, I cannot shake it from my head. But you did
Well,
a
that's good
remix.
for me.
Yeah, no, it's a great song, and I mentioned the cinematic videos. That's I felt like I wanted to take out popcorn and watch it. That's but you did a remix with Imogen Heap, and I read, and I didn't notice this when I was listening to it, that you used AI in like a vocal collaboration, and I've often wondered like what would David Bowie be doing with AI today, because he always embraced new technology. What do you think is the artistic potential of generative AI?
I think if it's the person themselves doing it about their own art,
Yeah,
then that's, green light. You can do whatever you want. But if it's somebody else doing it with somebody else's art or voice,
yeah,
that's crossing a boundary that's I'm not comfortable with or I don't agree with. Because, in the remix we did, Imogen did it herself with her own voice and her
mm,
own production. And that's like, go for it. But if you're stealing somebody else's work or if you're trying to replace people with it, that to
yeah,
me is not okay and
no,
crosses a boundary. Um, if it's you using it in your own world and your own art to experiment and to, maybe do stuff that you wouldn't be able to otherwise, then, I'm all for that.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I'll just place a marker. I thought that was the first legitimate creative use of AI that I've seen in real art, as opposed to just like a novelty type of thing. Uh, so I thought that was really impressive. Um, so I just want to ask you two last questions, and you've just been terrific, and I've just enjoyed talking with you so much. Going back to Heroes, all the musicians you worked with participate in an annual concert in New York City. That's the Sound and Vision of David Bowie concert. And is there any chance that we'll see you in New York in 2026 to take part in that?
Um, Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm, I'm like, I plead the fifth on that one.
Okay. Well, if you're interested, tell Mark you're interested. Last year, Suzanne Vega made a special guest appearance, and I think you would be very well received.
I would be honored to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see what happens.
Okay. All right. I might see you there. So I hope I didn't get either of us in trouble. So let me ask you my final question. I ask everybody, and I usually ask everybody their favorite Bowie song and album. And you already said what your favorite Bowie song is. So Karin Ann, what is your favorite David Bowie album?
I probably say Hunky Dory.
Yeah,
Um, I feel like that's like the album that's a cross between the folk world and the more rock and roll world. So I
yeah,
really like that one. Not to mention it has, Life on Mars on it, which is such an incredible song. So I would probably say that one. But then again, it is really hard to choose because I
yeah,
feel like there's so many great songs on so many different albums, and all of the albums are amazing. So hard
yeah.
choice, but probably that one. I'm gonna stand by it.
Okay, you know what? That for some reason that doesn't surprise me. When I was listening to Through the Telescope, I really thought it doesn't sound like Hunky Dory, but there's some thread. I thought this is her Hunky Dory. So,
Thank
Karin
you.
Ann, this was wonderful. You've been terrific. I'm looking forward to listen to. I'm older than you, so I get to listen to you for the rest of my life. So I'm really looking forward to that. And thank you so much. I was saying before, I don't think I'm going to be able to get you on the show in 6 months. So thank you for coming on now, and I really look forward to the future.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Okay, let's stay in touch.
Definitely.